Hi, this is Paul. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to make some videos on this television series called The Good Place. One of the things that I thought a lot about when I was working my way through the 4 seasons of The Good Place is kind of what happened to God. Now, The Good Place reflects and plays on American assumptions and desires about an afterlife, and in an upcoming video, I'm going to bring in an individual named Nathan Jacobs, who has done a lot of thinking about people who have left Christianity and religion behind, the nuns, Nones, in American culture. And I think this television show really speaks to them in some particular ways. So that's a future video I want to make about this. But I really wanted to spend a little bit of time in this video and focus on The Good Place and God. The Good Place not only reflects American ideas, but it also shapes the American imagination about the afterlife, as have many movies over time. It's a Wonderful Life, Heaven Can Wait. There are Ghost. There are many movies that have explored questions of the afterlife and worked on these questions. Now, Americans, generally speaking, in surveys, have consistently been God believers. Now, this might strike you because over the last 10, 15 years, we've had the rise of the nuns, Nones, people who have walked away from religion, but not a lot of people have walked away from God or the idea of God. And even in this fairly recent survey by Pew, it might look like only 63% believe in God, absolutely certain, but fairly certain is another 20%. And not too certain is another 5%. And really, you're looking at high 80s, over, about 90% of Americans say they believe in God. Now, whatever they mean by that word God, that's a whole nother conversation. And that's a very big question, because I think actually what's been happening in America is that the mostly unexplored assumptions about what we mean by that word God has really been changing quite a bit in the last 50 years. And that's been insufficiently explored, partly because it's just so easy to use this little 3-letter word God and assume that we all know what each of us is talking about. And I think this was highlighted in the whole Jordan Peterson phenomenon, where he wouldn't say he believes in God, partly because he didn't have any confidence that people out there would share his ideas of what it means to believe and share his ideas of what he means by God. And so I think that was actually quite savvy and quite knowing on Jordan Peterson's part. Because again, if you just put it as a survey question, close to 90% of Americans will say one way or another they kind of, sort of, or most certainly do believe in God. 63%. That's a really big number. Now, The Good Place as a show is about Eleanor Shellstrop, who dies and wakes up in the afterlife. Now, I've been avoiding spoilers in the first 2 videos that I've done in this series, and in this series, I'm going to spoil some things in seasons 1 through 3. I'm going to hold off on season 4. Season 4 you can view on demand if you have cable television. You can pay per episode on Amazon. I don't think it's out on DVD or Blu-ray yet. Nor is it on Netflix yet. So in this particular episode, I'm trying to hold off on spoilers as long as I can, just because I know some people, because I'm doing this series, wanted to catch up and watch some of it. So in this particular video, there will be spoilers from seasons 1 through 3. So if you don't want them spoiled, don't go any further. Hit the Netflix and, power through them and then come back to it. But yeah, seasons 1 through 3 are fair game in this video. Almost right away, when this video starts, there are Christian vibes. And this should be expected in any major production coming out of the United States or of the West in general. Eleanor wakes up, and the first person she meets is Ted Danson, a nice-looking, older man, but not elderly. And he's got that bow tie on, and he's very kind, and he's very professional, very American middle class. and his name is Michael. Now, Michael Schur is the creator of the show, but right away when you say Michael, people with Jewish, Christian, or Islamic backgrounds will immediately think of Michael the Archangel, and they're sort of setting us up for what we would imagine to be basic religious assumptions about good people when they die go to a good place, bad people when they die go to a bad place. And it's sort of whitewashed and made generic via the language. You're not in heaven, you're going to a good place. And this is a very, very common move made by Americans in order to deal with pluralism. The good place is sort of like Disneyland America, Main Street America that you'll find in Disneyland or Disney World. America is the happiest. Disneyland tries to be the happiest place on earth. It's sort of like Mayberry without hidden Jim Crow that you had in Mayberry and in the Andy Griffith Show. But you already begin to get some clues in the first episode that the administration of the good place really isn't up to the task, that there are some things going on here that might lead us to believe that perhaps the good place will not satisfy everyone. There are some things going on there that aren't right. Now this gets into what I think is one of the best default articulations of sort of middle class American religion. I've mentioned this book a lot in my videos because I think it's a tremendously helpful book in terms of understanding the religious and spiritual assumptions of millennials, of Gen Xers, and of a lot of baby boomers. It was written by a sociologist named Christian Smith, who I think is currently teaching at Notre Dame. He wrote a book, Soul Searching, because he did a massive survey, an in-depth survey via interviews of the religious and spiritual lives of American teenagers, and he did this in the 1990s. And what came out of this book is something that you may or may not have heard before, moralistic therapeutic deism. And you can Google that and you'll come to a Wikipedia page that is a pretty good description of it, but I'm just going to flesh out these three words here. Deism. Deism is a conceptualization of the universe that was foundational in terms of the rise of the scientific revolution, sort of post-enlightenment. God made the universe, but is some way distant from it. The universe stands apart from God. But with moralistic therapeutic deism, God isn't too far away. God can be called upon. For the most part, God leaves us alone unless we get in a jam, and then he can be called upon, and our expectation is that God will come in and help us out when we're in a pinch, at least if we're sort of a good person. There are a lot of ideas about karma that infiltrate American religious and spiritual assumptions that things are sort of a meritocracy, and this gets into the moralist idea that it's sort of a meritocracy. So if you've been a good person, if you've for the most part done things right, then God should be available to come in and get you out of a pinch and help you and not let really bad things happen to your family. But that's sort of God's job. He made the world, he lets it go, he sits off, he watches us. If we call him, if we sort of do him a favor or have reason to imagine we put God in our debt by being good people or doing good things, then we can count on God to rescue us and do good things for us. So built into that idea is also the idea that, generally speaking, the world is supposed to be a good place. And history is supposed to have a moral arc that bends towards justice. That history in the end will be right and good and fair, and things will be as they should be. Again, there's deep dependence on Christianity for this idea. Not exclusively, but deep dependence, at least in the West, on Christianity for this idea. So deism, that God is sort of distant, the world stands apart on its own, away from God, moralistic, that the arc of history bends towards justice. History is sort of a moral meritocracy. Good people get rewarded at the end of their life, bad people get punished. and therapeutic. The job of God and the universe is to make us feel happy, to feel good about ourselves, to make us into better people. So if you've watched The Good Place enough, you know that these ideas are deeply embedded in the program. And the program in many ways really is an expression of this moralistic therapeutic deism that Christian Smith brought out. And it's interesting, Vox did an interview with Michael Schur, and he didn't reference this at all, but I think the show lends credibility to the observations that Christian Smith made in his work on the spiritual and religious assumptions of American teenagers back in the 90s. Now, one of the things that you'll notice right away is that there is a bureaucracy in heaven. We don't escape this. And Michael has certain rules he needs to follow. And there are certain rules that everyone must follow. Eventually, you learn that there is not only a good place and a bad place, but there's sort of a medium place. And in this medium place, there's only one person who has an issue with cocaine and is a bit of a sex addict. And actually, one of the things that you'll recognize if you watch all 4 seasons of the show, that there are some continuation problems in the show. That once you get well into season 3, you begin to learn that some of the things that were brought up in season 1 and 2 really don't hold through all 4 seasons. And if you listen to that Vox podcast with Michael Schur, you'll notice that they kind of made the show up as they went along. It's a sitcom. We're not going to demand philosophical rigor from it, but what the show expresses and what the show illuminates, I think, is helpful for understanding our own culture and understanding sort of the default assumptions that people absorb simply by living in our culture. We have to imagine that all of the expressing and communicating that we're doing is having an impact on each other. And in many ways, what television does is mold our frames more than our specific ideas. And I think this program really does that. And so there is, in fact, a bureaucracy. And Michael, for all of his capacity to change things in The Good Place, has to follow certain rules. As I mentioned before in the program, pluralism is a very big deal. And the American religious and spiritual America's religious and spiritual attempt to address pluralism usually is in abstraction and sort of we're going to have a good place and a bad place. Heaven and hell would be too specific. So pluralism is a big deal. Mystery is a big deal. And the universe is finally open-ended. And as I mentioned before, Doug Forsett is someone doing magic mushrooms with a friend in his dorm room, and he figured out the universe. All of the other religions got part of it. Some got a little part, some got another part, but this guy sort of happened upon it. Nobody knows the truth. Religious traditions and authority figures aren't trustworthy. So here, but included in this Doug Forsett story is the idea that anyone, this egalitarian idea about knowledge, about luck, anyone can discover what the truth is. That's very much a democratic idea where no one is further from the truth than anyone else. That's deep in our ethos, and so you can find it yourself. Here comes a big spoiler at the end of season 1, and it's a biggie, and it's an important one for this series, and it's excellently done. Because at the beginning of season 1, we think that Michael is an archangel. And this is sort of a Christian story, and there's a good place and a bad place, and good people get rewarded and bad people get punished. And then we learn that Michael is actually a demon in a human suit. And what The Good Place has been an innovative experiment in torture. The demons have kind of gotten sick of squashing penises and butthole spiders and a bunch of the other little jokes that the show has. Now, they don't actually show squashing penises or butthole spiders. They just talk about them because it's American sitcom TV, so they're not gonna get too edgy in some things. But the Good Place is sort of like Sartre's hell, where hell is other people. And this has all been a big joke, and that sort of explains the weird things that we found in The Good Place. But what happens in season 2 is that we learn again and again and again the humans that they're supposed to be fooling and torturing by having them imagine that this is the good place. Well, Eleanor keeps figuring it out, and that keeps spoiling it. So what they keep doing is rebooting and rebooting and rebooting. Not only, and this is what gets interesting in terms of the simulation theory, Michael has the ability to reboot all of the humans and their memory and their perceptions to really toy with them. Which makes, there's tons of questions when you have a broad enough field to think about. Why would you bother going through making things when everything is purely perceptual or phenomenological in your universe, when you can just reboot personalities with the snap of a finger? One of the things that we learned is that all but 4 of the humanoid people in The Good Place, the 4 real humans, are demons that are in on the act. And they're just trying to subtly torture these people for the rest of their lives. Now, in terms of C.S. Lewis books, the book that obviously comes to mind is the Screwtape Letters. But this is a very clever move on the part of this show, because what it tends to do to people is make them think about the world that we all share now. And again, that's sort of what television does. It monkeys with our perceptual frameworks. And so then very quickly, people will be asking questions, well, are we right now in a simulation? And are we right now really in the bad place because life is frustrating and life is hard, and we live in a frame that says, well, life should be good and life should be pleasant and life should be everything we could ever ask for? So Michael clearly is not God. There is a character in the show that is probably the most God-like and the most telling with respect to that question, and that is Good Janet. Is Janet God? Now, again, there are some real continuity issues with this series, but Janet is a computer program, not a robot, not a girl, not a woman. She's a computer program, and this, again, continues to lend to the simulation argument that sort of runs beneath this series. I think right now American culture is really struggling and haunted by the simulation question. You can hear it in Elon Musk. I've talked about the simulation question on and off throughout the videos that I've made over the last couple of years. But Janet is sort of portrayed as being eternal in that she kind of has no beginning and no end, except that she can be rebooted. And every time she gets rebooted, she comes back a little bit smarter. She's all-knowing. She knows everything in the universe, and she's kind of all-powerful. She's basically Siri with a body, or Google Assistant with a body, if we won't be too Apple-centric, in The Good Place. And if you want something, you can ask it of her, and she will bring it right there. In terms of the god of moralistic therapeutic deism, she's sort of it. She will come when you call her, and she will give you exactly what you want. She knows everything. She can do anything. In fact, there's one scene in one show when they actually have a fight with some of the demons, and Janet kicks butt. There's almost nothing Janet can't do once she has her powers. And so in many ways, in terms of the show, she's the closest thing that we have to God. But Janet comes in 3 varieties. And again, this sort of brings up a lot of ancient philosophy. Is this world the product of an evil demiurge? Is God supposed to be neutral? Because we learned that there's a good Janet, there's an evil Janet, and there's a neutral Janet. And the neutral Janet is kind of boring, and the evil Janet is, kind of a jerk. And the neutral Janet is sort of the god of moralistic therapeutic deism. Good Janet tries to serve people by giving them whatever they want. Evil Janet is a selfish jerk who sort of complies with the requests of the demons. And neutral Janet serves the neutral space of The Good Place, which is really the neutral administration. And in the previous videos, I've talked a little bit about the accountants that are there, and they sort of continue to comb human thoughts and ideas and motivations and actions and assess the point value in the meritocracy. They are accountants. There is also a judge. But you'll notice that these accountants and the judge are neutral. They can be petty. They're sort of petty bureaucrats. The judge, in fact, does nothing but watch American television and has crushes on certain American characters, but they're not really committed to human welfare. And in fact, they sort of slavishly continue to follow the rules and enforce the rules as they see them. There's a pre-existent set of rules that nobody really accounts for. There's no real accounting for the universe in this. There's no explanation given for why human beings came about. It's sort of that everything else just came about. Everything sort of emerged from that which is, and these systems developed over time, and people have their roles to play within the systems. Now, if you've been watching any of my other videos, you'll recognize this woman. Her name is Christine Hayes. She teaches biblical studies at Yale University. She's an Old Testament scholar, and she has done a lot, been very helpful for me for introducing me to the ideas of Ezekiel Kaufman, who was a Jewish scholar who wrote a very interesting book on the Bible, about the Bible, and noted that really there's sort of two major perspectives on the universe. One is impersonal and the other personal. It's really the meta-divine realm, as he calls it, versus or the theistic God. And I'll put the link to her video below. It's a very interesting video if you're into some of these kind of things. But the idea is that the meta-divine realm just sort of is, and there are rules within it. There's not necessarily a reason why things are as they are. They just sort of are. It's impersonal, and any conscious agent who wants to make their way in the world to get what they desire, for whatever reasons they have desires, they find their way to work in the meta-divine realm. Now, again, if you look in my videos, you'll find I've been doing quite a bit of talking about this idea. I think this is a fairly compelling way of framing the options, the worldview options that most people choose between. So the meta-divine realm simply is, and what always and finally is an impersonal universe governed by laws. And one of the things that you can see is that this works equally well for ancient paganism as it does for a lot of modern materialisms and modernisms. That, again, the universe is impersonal. It simply is. Things aren't necessarily here for a reason. They simply are. And if you want something in the universe, you work your way to getting what you want. This is contrasted with classical theism, where there is a God, and the will of this God is good. And so if you're in alignment with the will of God, you are good. If you are rebelling against the will of God, you are bad. But in a sense, there's no real neutral space. An all good and personal God is the source of being, not just another being in the world. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to talk with an author who wrote a very interesting book on transubstantiation, and especially I'm hoping maybe to do more conversations with him if he's open to that, because these questions about whether God is a being or God is being itself, these are really foundational questions, and these are issues that have been thought about and worked through for a very long time in philosophy. They come all the way up to the present age with Heidegger. It was very much treated in many medieval theological and philosophical controversies. Is God a being, or is God being itself? And perhaps one of the reasons we don't find God in the good place is because, well, first of all, the good place seems to very much be set in something like a meta-divine realm. We don't know why the judge came into being. We don't know who created human beings or what their reason for creating human beings was. But everything just simply is, and people are going about their business in this pure bureaucratic way. One of the things you learn from the Vox podcast with Michael Skur is that he sort of had this idea for the podcast when he was sitting in LA traffic. And if you've ever been in LA traffic, you can have an idea of why people sit here and have ideas about the way the universe should be, because you've got a lot of time and a lot of frustration. one of the things that he was hoping for was that there would be some justice in the universe by which people who would behave badly in LA traffic would someday receive their reward, because there's never a police officer right there to write someone a ticket for driving recklessly or creeping up the shoulder or cutting you off. But again, that's sort of an impersonal universe, various agents within it with varying degrees of power that they use to get what they want. That's sort of the world of The Good Place. It really isn't a theistic world where there's reasons for this. But I'd say theism gets smuggled and sneaks in via the characters and their moral assumptions. The Good Place is in the meta-divine realm. Beings in this space have different levels of power. The judge has a lot of power. Demons have some power. But the judge has more power over the demons, over Michael or Sean, who seems to sort of be the head of the demons. Ancients would consider these people or these characters gods. And Michael, for example, it's suggested that he is a fire lizard, but he's wearing a human form. And some of the demons are lava monsters. And so this would actually fit very well in an ancient view of the world. Can we say that there really is right or wrong in the meta-divine realm? Actually, that's very difficult. There's more is and can do than right and wrong, because there really isn't, as in theistic systems, a divine will to violate or to rebel against. Right and wrong just seem to be more personal preferences. There is no God, as in the Abrahamic religion, in The Good Place. If you watch the Four Seasons, nobody really fits God. As I said, Good Janet is sort of the moralistic, therapeutic, deist God, but that's about it. Now for a season 3 spoiler. There's something deeply wrong with the administration of The Good Place. Nobody has actually gotten into The Good Place since the Columbian Exchange. And if you want to read Thomas Mann's book 1493, I would highly recommend it. Very interesting book about really the beginning of globalization that happened in 1492 with Columbus setting foot on what we today call the Caribbean islands or the West Indies. Ever since then, in fact, the world has been too complex for simple human moral agents to navigate the world and do the right thing. And so basically what is left is for Michael, who at the end of season 1 is revealed to be a demon, but he's got sort of a human fascination with human beings and develops a real soft spot for human beings. And so you have the idea that, well, even demons can be reformed. Even demons can become good people. And I don't want to give away too much from season 4 if you haven't seen it. But again, with the help of the gods, our team here are going to remake the universe and turn it towards justice. That becomes the mission by the end of season 3. They're in competition and cooperation with the other gods, such as the judge and even Sean, and they must make it right. Again, this is a very American approach to how we think about the universe. The Good Place is really a metaphysical mashup. There really is no God as such, a theistic God in the universe, but there's a lot of theist smuggling via our moral assumptions. It is set in the meta-divine realm, but we keep sneaking theistic, moralistic assumptions, really moralistic therapeutic deism, which has deep roots in Christianity. We keep sneaking this into the Good Place. And they are travelers looking for the good. What does it mean to live a good life? What is the good? What is happiness? They're not just, it's not just their good, sort of like Odysseus is trying to do in order to, leave the disaster of the defeat of Troy and make his way against the gods who are against him back to his wife and reclaim his wife back from the suitors who really want to take his estate and take his kingdom. No, this is a new good administration because the universe has gone wrong. And these regular people who, they've got their own little special skills and insights on life, none of which are exceedingly good. They're all deeply flawed, but Eleanor and Chidi and Jason and I cannot think of her name right now. This is why I make slides, because I don't think of things, and you'll have it in the comment section. But the four of them, with the help of Michael and good Janet, will reform the structure of the universe. That is a deeply, deeply American approach to reality. Really, Americans are a mix between Jamestown and Plymouth. And what we find in The Good Place are pluralistic pilgrims. They take a pluralistic hodgepodge. We won't call it heaven and hell. We'll sort of call it nice, abstract, distant, good and bad place. Take a pluralistic hodgepodge of religious ideas and give it to kind of regular people who are at heart good people and mean well. And these four people will redo the universe and undo the injustice that has happened since Christopher Columbus set foot in the Americas. And they will assume we assume a morally well-meant, can-do American spirit to finally rescue humanity and bring in the kingdom of God. That's a very Puritan mission, very pilgrim mission to the frontier, and bring your things to the Indians, even though the Indians are the ones saving them sort of from death. Again, read 1493 or read just about any contemporary account of what life was actually like in the very earliest days of Europeans on the North American continent. But that's really the good life in many ways. It's pluralistic pilgrims in a simulation bringing justice to the universe. It's really what the show is about. Is there a God? No. It's not theistic. It's much more the meta-divine realm, but theism keeps getting smuggled in through the moral achievement of the characters. So there's another installment of the Good Place videos. I'm going to have a lot more to say about the nuns. We'll bring in Nathan Jacobs and some of his stuff. And I might, as I did earlier this week, try another video where there's an abridged version without any video commentary, an extended version with more video commentary. So we'll see how those do. If you like this video, leave a comment.